that we can apply, and that will work. In fact, there's a principle of subsidiarity, which is saying basically that the regional body should take on only those things that cannot be done at the national level. So we get together as a group of countries and we decide that we are going to go down a certain course. The responsibility for implementing these objectives and policies rests with the governments, the national governments, and there are some elements of those that cannot be done at the national level, and those would then be done at the regional level. I mean, that's a basic premise on which we are proceeding, that whatever can be done effectively and efficiently at the national level will be done there. And we mentioned earlier the management, just as an example, the management of shared stocks. Management of shared resources, such as the flying fish, cannot be done at the national level. So those types of decisions can only take place at the regional level. So if we are going to manage those resources, those shared resources, then we have to establish regional and sub-regional, or in some cases it may only involve two countries if the stock is shared between two countries. But we have to establish these types of mechanisms to take the decisions and to manage the stocks. At the end of the day, the implementation will probably still rest with the national governments. So we make the decisions collectively, but the implementation would have to take place at the national level. So that's the political reality within which we operate.
Right. Well, on that very interesting note, let's turn it over to you. Perhaps you might have a better idea of how you think this industry should be managed, and your questions to our panel here assembled this evening at the Fisheries Division of the Ministry of Agriculture in Bridgetown, Barbados. And if you would, we'll just take our first question here. The gentleman here in the blue shirt.
The very first sentence out of the moderator's mouth tonight was that the fishing industry benefited Barbados by $29 million, I guess, in any given year. Are you happy with that figure? And if so, how has fisheries or SERMES, which I know you are part of, come up with the numbers to make that determination?
Patrick McConney.
Well, Jonathan, I won't go into the details of calculation, but the SERMES was one of the parties that undertook a study of the value of the fishing industry, at least one part of the value, which is taking the value of fish from the vessel all the way through the marketing chain and trying to determine what that value would be. As to whether I'm happy with a particular figure, probably is more important than a discussion on the figure itself. In terms of happiness, I would suggest that it would be good to weigh that figure of value of the industry, which in a sense is one way of looking at the benefit, against what it costs to manage the industry. My impression would be, and we haven't looked at this in detail, is that the value of the industry probably exceeds what is put in to manage it. And therefore one could argue that really there is a gap that should be filled with more attention to management, not only on a national scale, but the regional networking that we've been talking about. And that would give even greater returns to the industry, because our boats don't stay in the waters of Barbados alone. I think that is probably the matter of debate.
Listening tonight, we are talking about managing the fisheries. Have we ever looked at land-based activities, industrialization especially, the loss of mangrove that are really affecting and depleting the resources? Thank you.
All right, that question sounds like one for both Milton Horton and Patrick McConney.
We know that they are in fact having a negative impact and contributing to the poor state of fisheries in the region. And I mentioned, and we have mentioned several times, the uncertainties, the high level of uncertainties that we're dealing with in the sector. And those are some of the challenges that we have to put together and why we need to use a precautionary approach. But we do know that agricultural runoffs, sedimentation due to coastal development, destruction of the mangrove, which are nursery grounds for some of the important commercial species, all these things, just pollution generally and human impact of human activity on the seagrass beds, on the marine ecosystems generally. We see degradation of these systems all across the region, and it cannot continue. I mean, we have to find a way of arresting these things. So fisheries management is really not just limited to managing the species and controlling the effort of fishing boats. It has to be integrated in the wider plan and program for managing our coastal resources. So we talk about integrated coastal management as a way of moving forward.
A little bit more about that integrated coastal management from Patrick McConney.
One of the powerful instruments, and it's not a binding instrument, it's voluntary compliance, but it's the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. And it is at the basis of the fisheries management plans of Barbados, and it has been adopted by most of the other countries in the area. And one of the articles talks about the integration of fisheries into coastal management. And it places a very serious responsibility on states to ensure that fisheries have a voice in whatever pertains in the coast. That could be tourism, that could be industry, that could be agriculture. And you need to look at it in terms of not only the threats to the habitat degradation, but also the displacement of fishing settlements. Areas that fishing boats can haul upon before are taken over by residences, upscale developments. There are also, what are the opportunities? Mitch talked about, well, if you're going to conserve fisheries resources, what then are you going to offer as opportunities for young people who would otherwise get into fisheries? And that is why we need to look not only at the fisheries sector, but have an intersectoral approach to determine where labor forces can best be deployed, what are the viable alternatives that people have to get out of fishing if they so wished, or to remain in and do it responsibly.
Good night. It is good to have these panel discussions, but what is the purpose of this discussion? Where do we go from here?
Right. Well, you've kind of preempted the end of this whole thing, but where do we go from here in terms of marine governance?
Where we go from here, we must understand that the Ministry of Agriculture must recognize its role, and that is, I listen very carefully to the impact of the excess water going into the sea and how it's impacting on the reefs. At a time when we claim to be a water-scarce country, we are still complaining about the amount of water entering the sea. And it's clear that it goes beyond that, because that water leaves the fields and is also damaging the roads of Barbados. So we need to see a relationship between the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Environment, to recognize that we need to manage our water supply, because it's also damaging the seabed, and it will also impact on the Ministry of Tourism. So we need to have a total picture of what is occurring and find solutions for it. It is not now only about the fishermen, but we have to recognize now that is a wider picture, and that is impacting on the tourist industry. And maybe if we carry out a study showing how it's impacting on the tourist industry, you might get better results.
And not only a lot of water, but water that is laden with agrochemicals, such as fertilizers and so on, that have been severely hurting reefs. Let's take one more question from our audience here.
First, Mr. Horton, fisheries scientists